Welcome back to another episode of the Adventures of a Disney Dad podcast. Chip and I are back after a brief hiatus when we were both down at Walt Disney World. And this week we're joined by Mike Rallman and Pam Forrester. They are co-hosts and the beginners of the Be Our Guest podcast. We're doing a little bit of a crossover podcast episode this week. The Be Our Guest podcast has been around for over 15 years in the Disney community, and we help celebrate their achievement of reaching over 2,000 episodes and 15 years running. We talked to them about all things Walt Disney World. We played a few games. We had a lot of fun. We hope you really enjoyed the episode. We're glad to be back. Next week on the podcast, we'll be catching up on all things MultiPass and the new updates at Walt Disney World. And we're also going to give our recap of the After Hours event at Hollywood Studios, the VIP tour that Chip and I went on, and more. So look for that next week. We hope you really enjoy this episode, and let's get right to it. And I think it's important for anybody that listens to our show, the Adventures of a Disney Dad podcast, that we give some context on, why we're doing this crossover episode and a little bit of the history behind Mike and Pam and how awesome they are in their podcast. Obviously an inspiration to Chip and I for starting ours. And most important for me, becoming a travel agent with the Magic for Less Travel. I was formerly a guest of Mike's, so that was my first experience with the Magic for Less and everything. And I think that that's really important. And so this week we're going to do a little podcast crossover episode. We're joined by Mike Rallman and Pam Forrester, two of the, I think we can call them four hosts of the Be Our Guest podcast. Is Scotty G officially a host now?
We made him a cartoon in the banner.
Yeah.
He's an official.
That signifies that you're included.
If the guy ever comes back from Europe, we'll have him back on. Yep.
Mike is, for anybody that doesn't know, Mike Rallman is a senior travel agent with the Magic for Less Travel, and Pam Forrester is the co-owner of the Magic for Less Travel, where I'm also an agent. The Be Our Guest podcast is celebrating over 15 years. They've published over 2,500 episodes and have over 10 million downloads, which is just insane to think about. Like just hearing those numbers and looking them up to me was just crazy. There's been a ton of friendships, a running club, and even marriages that have come from the Be Our Guest podcast community. Kids have grown up together. Mike has gone from driving to Walt Disney World to flying all over the country. Now the Magic for Less Travel as an agency has been growing like crazy. And the live call-in shows that Mike has done helps people survive a global pandemic. I think the importance of this podcast in the Disney community as a whole just can't be overstated. Chip and I have been longtime listeners, and we wanted to spend some time with Mike and Pam to talk about our love of Disney destinations, the origin story behind the Be Our Guest podcast and its history, things that just as listeners we've always wanted to know. I think the first time I met Pam in person at one of our agency events, like I just wanted to pull her aside to talk to her about the podcast. So I think this is a fun opportunity. So for the listeners of our podcast, we hope you'll join us in congratulating our friends at the Be Our Guest podcast on their historic and consistent run. I know Mike takes a lot of pride in his consistency of being on the podcast feed every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So with that said, I guess let's just jump into it. Mike, what is the origin story of how this podcast got started?
Well, first of all, thank you for the very kind words. And we couldn't do this without our amazing audience. Our listeners are the best. I mean, I feed off of them. They give us the energy to come back. And every Monday show is a listener who comes on and shares their amazing trip. And so that's really the origin of our podcast. Excuse me. It's called the Be Our Guest podcast because, I'm old. I mean, I'll admit it. I was young when this show started. That's how long we've been going. But now I'll admit I'm a little graybeard, I think, at this point. But I used to love scouring pre-social media days, the old trip reports. I would go on the old message boards and stuff because there was a hunger for Disney content, and it was a lot harder to come by 20 years ago. You go to the library and check out the Birnbaum's Guide every year when the new one came out, or, you would search for those things, but it wasn't as readily available. I sound like you kids now have it so good that you can find real-time streams all the time, but that's how, it is an amazing time right now. Where back then, I remember like a gold mine was if you found somebody who posted a trip report that had pictures, you were like, whoa, it's not just text, it's text and pictures. It was a gold mine. So I thought, what would be cool is if somebody came on and like talked about their trip, like an audio trip report. And so that's kind of the origin. I want somebody to come on, be my guest, talk about your trip. Once a week, we'll do this. And then WDW Today, way back in the day, they did this show. And I thought, man, how cool is it that these three guys are all in the same town and they all have the same passion and they sit around a table and they do the show 3 times a week? Like, I wish I had 3 friends who are all in the same. I didn't know what Skype was. I didn't know they were in 3 different places. They had me totally bamboozled. I was like, God, what are the chances? I had no idea how technology worked, but they were in different places. I started to figure it out. And my dad works in radio. He's a radio engineer and so forth. So he helped me figure out the technology stuff. And we went from there, and I've been bit by the bug. I love podcasting, and it really has expanded my world. I've got to meet people from all over the world because of this. And it went from there. I didn't want to just do 1 show a week. I wanted to do 2, 3, 4. And, I can't stop. This is my favorite time of the week when we get to sit down and talk with our listeners. I get to talk with Pam, Ricky, and Scott. They're my family. I don't consider my friends. They're definitely my extended family just as much as my real family. And it's a journey that I just hope keeps going and going. But that's really how it started. Trip reports, that's where it all began.
That's awesome. Yeah. When it comes to Ricky and Pam, and Pam, I don't know if you want to tell it from your perspective, but how did the 2 of you join in on Mike's crazy idea of, virtual trip reports essentially?
So we were really fortunate that in one of the early podcast episodes, we had one of our guests, Mike invited on one of our guests. It was CJ Hamrick, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Who's still booking with our agency.
Yes.
Yeah, he was a guest of our agency, and he shared some really great praise for our agency. And I heard it and I was like, oh, I gotta send Mike a thank you, because not at that time, not everyone was letting, someone talk about a travel agency, right? So I said, thanks so much for letting our guests talk about this trip and share the praises of our agency. That's really flattering. And Mike's like, why don't you come on? So I was like, okay, sure. So did it.
Well, I'll be honest, because we need some legitimacy here. We need an expert. Really, we're passionate Disney fans, but we need somebody that has a little, something behind them that knows what's going on. And you're an expert. Would you please come on? I remember that I talked to my wife. I said, this is Pam Forrester. She's a co-owner of an agency. She is an expert. And I remember my daughter, who's driving a car at this point, varsity cheerleader, and all this. She was like an infant. She was less than a year old and crying and screaming in the house at 8. I made the phone because I'm like, I'm going to make the offer to Pam to join our team. And I remember I did it in our tiny little house in our bathroom because it was the only place I could escape the baby cries. And I made the offer to you in our teeny little bathroom at our old house. So there you go.
I remember, and it was fun. I think the thing that's appealing to me about a podcast is that I think it's just a really pure form of communication, because there's not I can't rewrite the email 25 times, right, to find the perfect word. I don't get to go back with all of this. Since the very beginning, Mike has edited very little of our show.
Yeah.
He makes it sound good, but if you screw up or if you say something incorrectly, there's not someone coming behind and correcting that for you. It's going out as is. And to some, I think that's really scary, but I'll be honest, this is totally within my wheelhouse. I am a person who says what I think to my detriment, probably sometimes, right? It comes out of my mouth and then I'm like, oh, dang, I really should have worded that a little more professional or smooth or whatnot. So I love this, because this is sort of what podcasting is all about, right? The good ones, you get people's real thoughts, you get people's real reactions. And I think you feel the relationships. And that's what I think became really special about our podcast that we're so fortunate to have.
Chip and I have to edit them because otherwise we'd rant for an hour and a half. And
that's true.
They just end up way too long. So they've got to be edited a little bit. Otherwise, each episode would be an entire feature-length film. But when it comes to, and I know Ricky couldn't join us today, but Mike, how did Ricky join the group? And I think the majority of your newer listeners have been around for the evolution of hashtag Scotty G. But I want you to give a little taste of how Scotty, became a friend of the squad also.
Well, so Ricky, it's kind of funny because Ricky's parents were best friends with my parents. They went to middle school together. Her parents went to high school with my parents. And so my dad owned a mobile DJ company here in St. Louis. My dad worked in radio and so forth. And her parents owned a photography studio in St. Louis. So we were always running in the same circles, like at wedding receptions in St. Louis. Like her mom and dad would be shooting the wedding as far as photography stuff. I'd be the DJ. I was always DJ. I was the wedding DJ all the time around St. Louis. So I'd be shooting with her mom. Like her mom.
This tracks, right? Yes.
Mother-daughter dance. All right, first dance, dollar dance. Let's go. Let's do the chicken dance. You know, so I'm out there. So like I was always around her family. And at the time, you know, I was getting married and I got talking to Donna, her mom, and I was telling her how I was starting this podcast. She's like, "Oh man, Ricky is a Disney nut. She's crazy." I'm like, "Seriously, I need a co-host." She's like, "You need to talk to Ricky." And I was like, "All right then." It's like well, okay, I need a co-host, and apparently she's a Disney nut. Let's make it happen. And so I did. Boom. And so because I knew that, and she's like, she's always on this message board, and I think she was like on WDW Magic or something back in the day. So I was like, "Oh, it checks. She knows her stuff." And so she joined. Now, Scotty G, his story is kind of crazy. I didn't know him from anything. Like he just joined us like at a podcast cruise as like a listener. And like we hit it off so well just on a podcast cruise. And he has a daughter the same age as Mallory, Emily. Like they hit it off like sisters immediately. His wife and my wife get along like sisters. It was like meant to be. Like we're like brothers. I mean, he is just like the best guy. And he's added so much perspective to our show. I mean, it's weird because you know, he just came in just kind of naturally. He just all of a sudden just melded in so perfectly. And he's really good at podcasting. Like he's really good at it. And I don't think he ever expected to be, but I think he's added a lot to our show over the past couple of years. And I just, you know, I'm glad he's joined us because I think he adds new perspective and just kind of, you know, after 15 years, you kind of need something just a little bit different, a little bit new. And I think he really kind of brought that at the right time. So I'm glad.
Plus, he came with his own hashtag.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, he did steal it. He stole it from hashtag Tony from Spain, kind of.
Right. Yes.
He's borrowing it. So there you go.
Yes.
I think to Pam's point, you know, the relationship that you and Scotty have really shows. And I think that, you know, makes it better for the listener. And I'll tell you, I saw Scotty 2023 marathon weekend running the marathon. I ran by Scotty and I was more excited to see Scotty. He's not going to remember this, but I was more excited to see that guy than I was for any other character on the race or anything like that. I was like, because you spend, and I mean this seriously, just as a listener and fan of your podcast, we spend so much time with you that it feels like we know you the same way that we know our friends or our family or whatever else. That's just the reality. Like, because there's a lot of people that listen to your show 3 or 4 hours a week. And you like, I feel like I know Scotty. I feel like I know your guys' kids. And so seeing Scotty, he doesn't know me from Adam, but seeing him running by, I was like, oh my God, it's Scotty. Have a great race, whatever. And I just keep moving on. But you guys all have great personalities. You all mesh so well. And I think it says a lot about your show.
Going with that, like I'm on my Disney vacation. We're here till Friday, and my wife's like, "Yeah, we'll work around you podcasting with them because they're a part of our family. We listen." And my son's like, "Dad, you got to be our guest podcast joining you guys tonight?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, we're going to the water park. You have fun."
That is so cool. I mean, because and that is I totally get it, right? Because I'm the biggest podcast listener fan as well. Like I listen to some tech podcasts, and I'm always talking about Leo Laporte with my wife. It's a tech podcast. And this guy's as old as my dad, but I've been watching his show. He used to be on a TV cable station called Tech TV. And I went out and met him right before COVID happened. He came to St. Louis for some tech conference, and I went to this bar to meet him and got a selfie with him. He would never remember me, but I'm always talking about all these tips he has, like your iPhone is. I'm always like, well, Leo said, she's like, who? I'm like, Leo. She's like, who? I'm like, Leo Laporte. Oh, that guy you listen to. Yes. She's like, it's like my imaginary friend to her, right? Because she doesn't listen to the show, but I totally get it, right? It's a one-sided thing at first, but it's a cool thing. And I appreciate that so much. But yeah, Scotty has a lot of personality. And I mean, Scott's got fans worldwide. Like right now, he's on a cruise in Europe, right? Listener of the show on the ship with him. He met him in Norway. I mean, podcasting though is very cool because it's so global. And I was having this discussion with my dad, who's been a terrestrial DJ in St. Louis for a long time. And 50,000 watt station, program director, on-air personality. And I always thought that was the coolest thing. Like he could broadcast to the entire city of St. Louis, 3 million people. But then I'm like, I get to podcast, and my podcast goes to Australia, and Norway and Japan. I got listeners all around the world. And he's like, that's pretty cool. So it's a neat thing. I love it.
I think, the community that's been built around the podcast is a lot of fun. And, Chip and I feel that way about, the guests that we have come on the show, and you quickly become friends. But,
100%.
like I find myself as a listener, like you have this relationship you've built with Wade's, and I hear about it,
Mhm.
and I hear about Wade's kid going to work at Disney, and I'm rooting for Wade's kid working at Disney, and I don't even know him, and it's just fun, and I think that that's great. And like obviously, I've gotten to know I personally know now people that have gotten married from your podcast crews, which is just like the whole idea of that is just I would use a word that needs to be bleeped, but it is absolutely nuts to think about. So putting all that aside, like Pam, I really want to touch on the agency itself too, right? Because the Magic for Less Travel started in 2002. So
Yes.
shortly after the podcast starts going, Mike, you became an agent around this time. So like, how did the Magic for Less Travel start? And Mike, how did your role as a podcaster play into you becoming an agent with Pam's agency?
Well, go ahead, Pam, because the agency started well before I got involved.
It did. And that's funny because it's a question actually that we get asked frequently, like which came first, the podcast or the agency? And we were around since 2002 because, the year after 9/11, what's a better business plan than to start a travel agency, right? I mean, sure. But it really grew out of my like a love of travel and a passion for Disney in particular, because at this point in time, there were all these people sort of going to Disney, but like Mike said, there was a lack of information, and we just saw that people were doing it wrong, for lack of a better description, right? They were paying way too much. They were, doing stuff they didn't need to do. And we just felt like we were in the best position to be able to offer some advice, some help, and to let people start to vacation in a way that was sort of like the way we vacationed, which is where I want to go to Disney and then I want to get home and I want to have my next trip on the books already. Like
100%.
there was a point in time where people didn't go to Walt Disney World multiple times a year. So it seems crazy, right? But there was actually a time with that, and we really wanted to help people get there. So that's sort of where it came from. It was, part of this whole. When we started, most travel agencies had a brick and mortar location that you could walk into, sit down, have someone plan your trip. But these people knew nothing about Disney World. They sold from California to Asia and everywhere in between. And I think this whole idea of specializing in what you do best really sort of came around at this time. And we're fortunate that that's one of the things we look for in our agents, that they have a passion for the destinations that they're selling and a knowledge, and are just basically able to add value to what the guest is doing. I think it's so much about the guests and taking care of what they need. And I loved when I had the chance to do that. Like when I was able to book trips, I loved it. Like that was my favorite part. And then as the agency grew, I really had to sort of shift my focus from taking care of the guests to taking care of our team. And that was hard because I loved planning the trips, but then I also sort of changed the way I thought about it. And now I got to be involved in even more trips. I mean, like you guys, I remember the trips from my childhood so passionately. With these are like some of the best times of your life, right? I mean, my parents were divorced, so there were different things that were challenging about that, but I got to vacation with both of them, and I have such fantastic memories that being able to be involved in that process, even in a small way, is so rewarding and just off the charts incredible. Like I'm literally excited every morning when I wake up at the ungodly hour that I wake up. But that's why I wake up so early. I'm excited that I get to do what I get to do every day. It's a blessing. I'm incredibly grateful. I'm grateful that people trust us with their trips. It's an awesome community to be a part of.
I wake up at go ahead, Chip.
I was just saying, you said it right. I'm here with my mom and my stepdad, and I've been on a trip with my dad and my stepmom. So you're right. It changes your vacation depending on who you're with, but the memories my kids are making it's going to be forever. You said it right on the head.
Yeah, it is. It's cool.
Pam, I have to note that I would wake up ungodly early if I was waking up at the Grand Floridian all the time too.
I noticed the chips in Saratoga, and yes, I can tell that from the mirror and the light fixture. Let me just say, after COVID, my husband and I lived at Saratoga for a good couple weeks during that whole time. So.
The paddock pool is about 5 feet that way. So.
Yes.
Oh, and it's calling, baby.
So Mike, we've established, when the Magic for Less Travel started, and kind of I know you were a teacher before this. What was your journey from podcasting to becoming an agent? What was that like? And how did you kind of get started with that?
Well, I think it's kind of very similar to what a lot of folks do, right? It was a part-time thing at first, right? And I think it's a great fit for somebody that works in education. It's just something to kind of supplement to be able to help get down to the Disney destinations, right? I talked to Pam about it. She talked to me about it. Do you want to try this thing? It's a great fit for somebody who's a podcaster who talks about Disney all the time, who knows the product. And so we talked about it, and I did it kind of slowly at first. And of course, with the podcast, as the podcast grew, I had the opportunity to work with more and more guests. And, it came to the point though, where after, several years where I just had to make that call with, is it going to be teaching, or is it going to be working and travel full time? Cause I just came to a point I couldn't do both. Like there's only 24 hours in a day, and it was really hard. Like for a few years I was doing both, and I was basically doing two just crazy jobs. I mean, education was wild. And, it's right before COVID, and that, the agent, I was lucky that my clients, I had a great load of clients, and I just decided, you know what, because it's scary to walk away, because I was a teacher for 17 years and I love teaching. I have a passion for education. We were talking about that in the pre-show. I loved every minute that I was a teacher. I got to teach the best spot in my district as a gifted teacher. I had the prime spot. I mean, I had the pick of the litter in my district, and I loved where I was, and I had the great administration behind me. And so it was hard to leave. My wife taught in the district. We taught together. But I think that everybody at some point needs to kind of try to challenge themselves. It was scary, like, to cut everything, and just jump, when you're in your 40s, to say, I'm going to challenge myself and see what I can do, and just totally reset and just go for it. Freaked me out. I remember that day I just walked out of my classroom not knowing how this was going to go. Went to my favorite Mexican restaurant with all my teacher friends, got some margaritas and some Mexican food, and said, let's roll the dice and see, and just challenge yourself. And, and it's been great. It's the best thing I ever did, because it kind of gives you a rebirth, right? But it's awesome because you get to get creative when you're a travel agent. You got to be creative in your marketing. You got to be driven. You got to be passionate. But I am passionate, right? I get to do the podcast. And it's fun because you get to share what you love, and I get to do what I love every day. So that's kind of how it started. And that's every day, but every person that books a trip with me, I give my 100%. I mean, I can tell them that, and I love it. And I thank them for their support. So it's really, like Pam said, we don't take any of our guests for granted. And because every trip is amazing. I mean, I've been looking forward to this cruise that I'm going on at the end of this week for literally almost 2 years. And I'm looking forward to it. Just because I want to spend time with my girls. I have a 16-year-old, girl. I have a 27-year-old daughter, and I have my wife. And while we see each other in passing throughout the year, these 7 days where we get to disconnect and not have to, she's not going to cheer practice. She's not going to a private tumbling lesson. And my wife's not going off to be the booster vice president meeting up at the high school. 7 days we get to sit down and have dinner together and go to towel folding. As bored as that sounds, it's fun. Trivias and stuff. It's going to be awesome to reconnect for 7 days. That's what I'm looking forward to. And every one of my guests, that's what they're looking forward to. So I want to make sure when they get there, they have that best time too. So that's what I get to do for a living. How cool is that? I mean, I got to remember that every morning when I get up.
And remember that in that tight stateroom when there's 5 of you in there. Remember that.
I mean, we got the biggest one we can get. We got the 4A. I mean, that's all. I'm not concierge or anything, but I did. I'm with all girls. I mean, I realize I'm never seeing that bathroom. I might try to sneak up.
Yeah, shower in the spa.
That's
Yeah,
what I'm saying. I already know. I mean, I'm showered in the spa. I'm never seeing that shower, but yeah, I did.
I will say, as somebody that experienced that as one of Mike's clients, it's the truth. Before I became an agent with the Magic for Less Travel, he gave every agent or every client, everything that they needed for a great vacation, regardless of how small or how big it was. And I think that says a lot. I feel like all of our agents at the Magic for Less do that, and that's why Pam does such a good job of, finding them and everything else. But as an agent, I've found it to be like fun when your clients start to wonder if they can become a travel agent. Mm-hmm. Like it's almost like a rite of passage where you just kind of, you have to like let them go and do their thing. And it is really fun to see people start planning their vacations. But I do want to jump in. We had some of our listeners that submitted questions that they wanted to us to ask Pam and Mike when they came on the show. And one of the first ones I thought was really introspective, I'll call it. Are there any specific episodes, guests, or even podcast events that stick out to you as your most memorable?
So Pam, I'll let you take it first, ladies first, if you have any.
So I have so many for so many different reasons, but I will say the podcast that we did on the ship, and we just talked about it this week. Like we got on the Dream, we had Evolution, we were on stage at Evolution recording a podcast. The travel agency logo was up on the big board. The BOGP logo was up on the big board. And it was like one of those moments where I was just like, oh my gosh, like I have to remember this. I have to remember that this is what we're doing. Like this is my job. This is what I get to do. This is part of it. Now, not every day is quite as glamorous or as exciting, but I think those are just such fun episodes to record. That, and like Mike said, we're really family. So when we get to do stuff like the Christmas show or whatever, which is a fan favorite, and we're absolute, like, I can't believe sometimes that people listen to us because
and those things are so dumb. I mean, we're so
stupid.
Dumb. I'm like, hang on, I got to go into the storage room and find Christmas paper to tear up during the show. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, but stuff like that. And then I think anytime we have the opportunity to sort of edutain people, right, to educate and entertain, that's a good time. We thankfully don't have all the answers, but we always have a answer. So we're liberal with that. So, but they're all fun to do. But those are some of the memorable ones. How about you, Mike?
I have two. It's always when we go to Give Kids the World and do anything with them. So we just had a big one where we were down there last September, and bad day. My high school football team lost a big game that night. I remember I was watching streaming at Coronado Springs. Scott, a listener came over. I got to tell you, you guys will both appreciate this story. I'm watching it at Coronado Springs on my iPhone, right? I mean, it comes down to the last play of the game, and we lose on this crazy Hail Mary on the last play of the game. And right as the ball is in the air, two listeners come over to meet me as we lose the game. And I think I might have been rude. Like, and I'm never rude. But I was like, no, I couldn't believe it. I apologize. I did make up to him afterwards, but I was like, because I was in my Howl Hawaiian shirt and everything. I hat and everything. Anyway, so, but when we work, like when we get to this is like partner up with Give Kids World. And this was an awesome day because this day we went down to the village and we had a volunteer event. We got to get behind like and serve food, and we got to it was a great day. We with like some people were working, our listeners were like doing like the putt and all kinds of stuff, man, wasn't it? I mean, it wasn't just serving.
It was fantastic. Yeah, they set us up. It was so much fun. Volunteering there was as fun, but you're right. When we get to do the auction, that was awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, like in one day, our audience brought together like $48,000 for the village, and so that's the power of just the good you can do through a podcast in like one quick day. And also, one that really sticks out for me is Mike Bankhead, the guy who really started our Lizards, our running group. He came on just kind of talking about his journey And he's kind of inspired me. Like he talked about his journey, like about how he started running. I'm like, well, if he can do it, I should probably get off the couch and try to give this a shot at some point. And that his interviews changed my life personally. I can't say for the better because like I got a sore hip, sore knee, and a pulled hamstring right now. But thanks, Mike. But no, it has. But
Mike is so authentic. I think that
he's an angel. Like
yes, he's life changing kind of person.
He is again another brother that I've met because of the podcast, and he is an angel. Like every day I thank God that Mike Bankhead came into my life, and I am dead serious about that.
I went back and looked. I think I joined the Lizards Facebook group, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here shortly. I think I joined that group in 2018, which is like just blows my mind because you're also like, how the heck has it been 6 years since 2018? Right. But that's a different discussion. One of the listener questions, in fact, that we got, and I'll come back to the other two that we have, but one of them was, how do you manage your life as a dad, travel agent, and then this weirdly consistent 13 plus mile a day streak you've had going, in spite of injuries and whatever? You always seem to be posting, you run 7 miles, you walk 9 miles, you run 13, like every day you're getting out there. How do you manage it all and the podcast?
And you walk in the evenings.
Yeah.
So you want to know a stupid stat? Okay, this is why I can't walk right now, but for 15 months, and it just ended like couple about 6 weeks ago. For 15 months, I averaged 23 miles a day. But
that's insane.
Okay, so that just stopped because my hip and knee and everything. So that was dumb. I have a treadmill. So what I was doing about 15 miles in the morning. So I get up at about 4:15, 4:30 in the morning and do 3 hours on the treadmill until it would time out. That was like when the treadmill would time out. So I'd mostly run that. I'd walk the back half, like a little bit of the back half of that. And then, so that would get me till about 7, late 7. Then I'd shower, grab a quick breakfast, and then I'm working like after that. And then, I'd try to catch up with the initial surge of emails, and then I'd do my phone calls while I'm walking on the treadmill again. And so, cause I'm very much like segmented. It's like phone work would be like quietly on the treadmill, cause I have noise canceling headphones and the sound, you can't tell if you're calling the vendors. And so you do that and grab a quick lunch, and then I'd walk a little bit in the afternoon and walk a little bit in the evening. And that's how you get to the miles. But that, and of course the dad stuff is not as intense when your daughter's, the one's up at coaching basketball in Chicago. So she's out of the house, and the other one's 16. So she's off doing her own thing with high school cheerleading. And so there's not a lot with that. So it's mostly, I work from home. So I don't have much of a life at this point. So it's, I'm here, but it's just a matter of, I don't have a lot of hobbies, and I work and I run, and that's about it. So I know it's kind of sad. So
I mean, the consistency,
but it's going to be changing. It's changing because the body's falling apart. So, and we've had a long talk with the doctor and with my wife. So things are going to be looking different moving forward. So
I'm going to tell people at some point, when you look up the word consistency in the dictionary, it's going to be Mike's obituary.
Yeah.
True.
Well, I mean, I'm very Midwestern. Okay. And I am just my grandpa and my dad brought me up like, your word has to be solid. Like if you say you're going to put out a show Monday, Wednesday, Friday, if it says that on iTunes, there better be a show there Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Doesn't matter if you're going on vacation, and if it just, I've had coaches, and I'm very much into sports, right? And I've had coaches that say, if you quit once, quitting the next time is going to be so much easier. Like, and if you quit the second time, it's easier than it was the first time. So never quit the first time. And I still remember that for when I was 12, and I'm 50. Like I'm mental when it comes to things like that. So I'm just, I just worry, I just always want to give the best effort every time. And I think it's to my detriment many times too.
To all of our podcast listeners on the Adventures of a Disney Dad podcast that were DMing me about Chip and I not putting an episode out last week, just ignore everything that Mike just said. Okay. Chip and I we were both at Walt Disney World, and like my word is good too, but it's like I'm not on Mike's level yet. So
it takes a little bit of psychosis to make this happen.
Oh my gosh.
100%. I mean, exactly. I'm sorry. I mean, I don't know what to say. It's wrong.
I think I said to Chip, I was like, if we skip 1 week because we're both at Disney, people that follow us on social media, they're not gonna like make a big fuss. And I probably had
They probably
like
will.
I had multiple emails and DMs like, where was the episode last week? And it's like, like we thought 1 week off would be okay, but we're gonna get to that consistency. But Mike, I as a listener of the show, we appreciate it, obviously.
Yeah.
Oh,
we also have between both of us 8 kids under the age of 10. So
See, now that's impressive. That's way more impressive than 20,000 episodes. I mean, I got 2 daughters, and I mean, it's almost put me in the grave. So I'm just saying, it's unbelievable. I can't do it.
Pam, a similar question was asked of you. You know, I get the privilege of being able to see kind of how you run the travel agency business, but you're also involved with a blog. You're a part of this podcast. So to whatever level in all 3 of those businesses, how do you manage it along with, you know, you've got an older daughter now. You and Steve travel a lot. How do you manage all of that stuff in terms of running a business and having a podcast?
Some days it's much rougher than others, right? But I always tell people this whole idea of work-life balance is a weird concept to me because work is part of your life, right? And so I think that there are different times that one part of your life takes up more of your time than the other part. But to be like, that doesn't compute to me, this work-life balance, because work is just another aspect of my life that I enjoy most of the time. So, you know, there are days when I'm here at 5 a.m. and still here later into the evening. And then there are days where, you know, like recently, my day working was at Lookout Key, you know what I mean? Or, you know, those things. So, and I was working, I promise.
Those are the days like I'm always like mad at Pam.
I have to sign me up for that.
I have to give her a hard time every time I see it because it's like, oh my gosh, Pam has to send an email from a Polynesian. Like,
exactly.
Well, listen, and I saw all the smiles between you and Jocelyn at Lookout Key, and it looked like fun. So
I know sometimes work involves like a drink and I'm in the ocean, but there's other stuff that comes after that, so it's not all quite as glamorous. But I think that's what, you know, that old saying that if you enjoy what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. I think that you just do what needs to get done. The company, I'm always saying this, but our company has values. And every time I have to make a decision, I'm looking at those values and like, how does this fit in? Does it uphold the values? Does it, all those things? And I think when you have that to guide you, then you know what to do in all aspects of your life. So, yeah.
We had another listener, Miranda, asked, how do you guys keep your Disney topics interesting to talk about it 3 times a week for 15 years? And I'm gonna be honest with you. There are days like, you know, we have guests on a lot, so that kind of helps. But there are days where I'm like, man, we've talked about that before. And, you know, the benefit is that Disney's always changing stuff and things are always new and fresh. But, you know, to a certain extent, you can answer the same question over and over. So how do you guys keep things fresh in terms of how you plan, or do you plan out your episodes?
So the look behind the curtain is we get ready to record on Mondays, and it is very rare that we have talked about what we're going to record before, like a minute before we're going to record. Wouldn't you say, Mike? Every now and then Mike will bring an idea, or one of us will bring an idea to the table. But I remember like at different times we had, you know, been guests on other podcasts and we got show notes, and I was like, show notes and an outline? What is this? Like,
I'll be honest, I sent you ours today and I felt bad about it because normally I send it like a week in advance. So but
you gave us more prep time than we've had in the past like 5 years. No, you know, but Mike has a lot of good ideas too, I will say. He'll bring this and float it out, or one of us will bring something and the other ones are like, I don't know. Didn't we just do that? And then we have a great episode list of all of our episodes that can get searched through.
Well, Pam kind of mentioned it. A lot of times we try to give tips, but we try to do it in a sneaky way where it is kind of educational, but it's edutainment at the same time, where it'll be like, a positive and a negative for each one of the moderate resorts. What we're trying to do is kind of sneakily get in there like, hey, remember these things, we want to kind of talk about the moderate resorts today, and just consider this, instead of just saying, hey, when you stay at the moderates, don't forget about this about Riverside, or don't forget about this when you go to Coronado, or, we'll play a game, but what we do is try to just kind of put a spin on things to make it a more exciting topic. Because like you say, I mean, with 2,500 episodes, we've probably given those tips or something very similar at some point 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 10 years ago. And they change, like you say, with the resorts changing. And Skyliner wasn't there at the Caribbean Beach 10 years ago. It is now. So there's lots to talk about. But I mean, also, like, we added a Discord server in the past year, and that thing has really taken off. And we call it the Clubhouse. And I get a lot of topics from our listeners over there. They just say, hey, we like the one positive and one negative about the resorts. Hey, how about doing that for the Disney Cruise Line ships? So that's what we're doing this Friday. So we did a show about that. So that was kind of fun. And we just did, and we talked about like the Eat to the Beat concerts. Who would you like? Just what's going on at Walt Disney World? We just I mean, and we never take it too serious. It's just like if you guys sat down, if we all sat down at Kona tonight to have dinner, we're all Disney fans. What we talk about? That's a podcast. That's Friday. It's basically Friday evening dinner. Let's have some talk about Disney. It's basically our Friday show.
And it does. I think we focus on adding value. And the other thing that we get from all of our listeners is they like the positive spin. And I think that really was not as intentional as I would love for it to have happened, right? I think what happens is we're naturally just positive people, and I will not apologize for being positive. I just am what I am, right? And it's not that we don't see when there are issues with something that's going on at any of the Disney destinations, but we have the option to focus on that or focus on something positive. And that we make a choice to do that. There are plenty of other news outlets and even podcasts where they're going to come up with the negatives, but I figure people can do that on our own. We're going to try to remind people of all the positives. So
I was going to say, you guys did a podcast episode about my trip back in 21, because I had a 3-day off-site with one park day, and you guys did a whole podcast because it was a live question. I asked a question on the listener question episode, and you guys, we're going to save that for our Friday episode.
And because every trip is worth it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, there's something to be said for everything. I mean, you can do that. I don't know. I just think that when you look at Disney vacations, I always try to say this to people. It's the good stuff. Like, is there something you can complain about when you go to Walt Disney World? Yeah. I mean, maybe it was too rainy, or it was too hot, or it was too expensive, or, you stood in line too long that day for your taste. Yes, you could say that. But I mean, you also got to experience world-class attractions. You got to see some amazing entertainment. You also got to have some awesome meals that day. And you got to spend hopefully great times with the people you love. You got to make memories that you'll remember 10, 20, 30 years from now. I mean, you can look at it two ways every single time. And I mean, we're always going to focus on the good. We're never going to ignore the bad. But I mean, who wants to download a show where you're focusing on the bad? That's everywhere. Like, that's just not our thing. And it never will be.
I think that's great. But speaking of fun and serious, we're going to play a quick game. Okay. And it's going to be, we're going to keep it quick, but it's going to be, I think it doesn't get more serious than playing this or that. Okay. So Mike, I'm going to start with you. You got to pick one or the other and give a very quick answer as to why you would pick one over the other. Okay. Yeah. These are all going to be Disney related. And I think they're also at least a little bit related to your personalities and interests. Some better than others, because I got to match them up so that they're a little bit difficult. Mike, if you had to pick a resort, Caribbean Beach or Grand Destino Tower, which one are you picking?
Grand Destino Tower every time.
Every time? And why is that?
I love Coronado. First of all, Maya Grill. I'm dinging myself here. Is that legal? I don't know. I love Maya Grill, but Coronado, I mean, it's a sneaky, it's a deluxe. I mean, especially Grand Destino Tower. It's a sneaky deluxe in there. I mean, and if you gave Coronado the Skyliner, it is a deluxe. I'm just saying, if that were ever to happen, but it's got great dining. I mean, think about it. It's got 3 bridges. It's got Maya Grill. It's got Toledo up top. It's got what else is it? It has. There's another
Quick
one.
service.
It's got El Mercado.
Rick's.
Rick's.
It's
Yep.
I mean, it's got it all. It's got the tower, which are super nice rooms. But I mean, even the other rooms that are non-tower rooms, and the casitas and the ranchos and the cabanas. It's got the dig site pool with the siestas pool bar. I mean, it's got it all going on. It's beautiful. And it's got a great location. I mean,
Coronado is Chip will tell you Coronado is my favorite resort, and I will die on that hill.
Okay,
It hurts my soul when
you're right. Okay, you're exactly right.
it hurts my soul when people pay more money for Caribbean Beach than Grand Destino Tower. But that's a different discussion.
Okay, well, here, real quick though, let me just, because we're agents, we got to be fair here, right? Okay, but if you are focused on going to Epcot and the studios, Caribbean Beach could be the right answer. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, if
You already decided, Mike, you're locked in.
Your bets.
You're ruining the game here.
No, because we had the discussion in our discourse the other day. I'm a resort guy. I'm not so big on the theme parks. I could just chill at the resort lately because I'm getting old. But if you're like those people that's got to be like in the park all day and everything, going back and forth, and you're Epcot Studios focused, Caribbean Beach is a great place to call home because you can get back and forth on that Skyliner so quick. That's a great place to think about. But me, you can hook me up at the dig site pool at Coronado and the Siesta's pool bar. I'm good. Yeah,
people are going to think that you're the lawyer and not me with that. Really well done.
I had to meet out law in my classroom for years. So
there you go. Pam, if you had to pick this or that, the Riviera or the Polynesian?
Oh, the Riviera.
And why is that?
So I appreciate having the kitchenette and kitchen facilities that are available there. So one of the running jokes on our podcast is I hate Disney quick service breakfast. I detest it. Every time I say it, Mike's always like, "Oh, what about the bounty platter?" I'm like, I hate the bounty platter. I hate it.
Wow,
so there's my negative for the week there, but honestly that makes a decision, and that it's why we end up staying a lot of times at the deluxe villas. So
my hot take about the Riviera is that Primo Piatto is the best pizza at Walt Disney World, and I will die on that hill too. And that leads me to my next question. It's almost like it was a planned segue. Mike, Via Napoli or Steakhouse 71? That means it's a good question anytime you guys are giving those noises. I like it.
I would say, I think it depends. Man,
you got to pick one.
You can't do that. You got to pick one. That's the whole point of the game.
Okay, I'm going Via Napoli because we destroyed a couple of 2-meter pizzas. What is a big pizza there? The biggest one, like 1.5 meter. I don't know.
Wow,
big dog. We had that. It was so good. I mean, it was so good that I don't even feel it. I never felt it hit the bottom of my stomach. We just kept eating it.
Chip or Pam, have you guys had the burger at Steakhouse 71 at the bar?
It's the best burger on property.
That's what everybody says. I've never had that yet. I need to have that. I need to have.
I'm going tomorrow night.
So the bartender, I went. What was it? I don't know. The days are running together now. It would have been Friday night. And the bartender told me it's technically only on the menu at the bar. It's not in the actual restaurant. And I looked and it's not, but he said that if you ask for it, they'll probably make it for you. And I agree. Jocelyn, who's been on our show and is an agent for the Magic for Less Travel, she raved about it. And it was phenomenal. It was so good. I've heard the one at Tiffin's is really good too, but definitely
Bison Burger. You got the Bison Burger over at
Geyser.
Geyser Point.
So the last one I want to do for this game, just because we're running a little long, and I want to make sure we get into the last couple of questions we've got here. Pam, if you had to pick this or that, Happily Ever After or Fantasmic?
Happily Ever After.
I like it.
Fantasmic. Okay, so I think the Fantasmic is a good show to end a day at Hollywood Studios. I think the seating there is craziness. Not only the time that people line up to get into the theater, but I do not like that stadium seating. I find it to be uncomfortable, and I don't know what it is that does it. I feel like the people in front and behind me are way up in my personal space.
But you get to do the wave. Come on now. You get
that doesn't help it for me. That might actually bring it down a little bit.
It's leaving Fantasmic is the worst. It's my wife's like, we're not
a challenge. Yes,
it's worse than leaving Mizzou games, man, and that's a terrible situation.
It is.
My wife said we're not going. We were supposed to go tonight, and she's like, we're not going. The kids, I'm not taking them through leaving there. Like that was her whole.
Well, that's it. And the Magic Kingdom fireworks, you can always choose to pay for a dessert party, which is what we end up doing because my husband hates the crowds more than I do. So there are these things. He's so easygoing except when it comes to this. So I'm like, what do I need to do to get you into the fireworks at the Magic Kingdom tonight? And the answer is always the dessert party. So I like that we can do that.
And that's a good caveat because I was going to say your privacy, your personal space doesn't get invaded like Main Street for Happily Ever After. Like that is the ultimate invasion of personal space.
It is.
So I'm going to cut off the game there. I think that's a fun little game to play, but I want to make sure we can talk about this a little bit because it's such an important part of the community that you guys have built, and it's the Be Our Guest Lizards. Mike, like first, how did you get started into Run Disney races, and in correlation with that, how did the Lizards get started?
So it's kind of funny. Like I ran a race way back a long time ago, just because I was at Disney just on a vacation when I was teaching. Pam and I went down with Paige way before Mallory was born. Just happened to be there over Christmas break. And it was one of those years where the marathon like happened early. And so we were finishing up our vacation. All these people started checking in, you know, like in sneakers and have big calves and short shorts and stuff. And I was like, what's going on? Like, is there a race or something? Sure. And I used to speed skate, right? So I was like, I should sign up and just run this race. I had no idea. Like you had to sign up 6 months before that. I'm like, that'd be fun. Like that looks cool. I'm an athlete. I was an athlete that time. I was so out of shape. But, you know, I had the juices flowing because I saw athletes all kind of showing up to do some athletic event. But of course, I didn't do it. But so then I looked it up and I was like, okay, that next year I'm going to try to run one of those races. And so I signed up for the half marathon. I didn't train or anything. I just said, I want to get a shirt and I want to run that race at Walt Disney World. So I drove down, didn't run. I didn't run. I just drove down and showed up like the day before and ran 13 miles. And I didn't run most of it because I was way out of shape, but I got the medal. I finished. I remember when I drove home, every time I stopped for gas, I couldn't hardly get out of my car. I drove a Jeep at the time. I remember like I was locked up so hard. I could barely pump the gas. Like I could barely get out of my Wrangler. And back then, I don't think you could pay at the pump. I remember it was a struggle just to get in to give my credit card and get back. I was like, oh God, this is the worst decision of my life. Anyway, the Lizards started because, again, that show with Mike Bankhead, he ran with, there was another big team All Ears back in the day that he was a part of, and they did a lot of charitable work and also running groups and stuff like that. Well, they kind of disbanded after a bunch of years, and he said, you know what, could we do something like that with your show? Because he was a big listener of our show. And I said, I would love that, you know, because you're a leader, you're inspirational. Please let's see what we can do. And it started off like 10 of us, 15 of us. And if you look at our Facebook group now, I think the other day I saw like 2,900 members of the Facebook group. Now we're not all running at the same time or anything like that. It's not that, but I mean, over 2,900 people have taken the time to join the Facebook group. And it's really cool because if you go over there, you'll see every day people post their walks, their runs, even people that are injured or not running at the time are encouraging others saying, hey, great run, or, you know, way to stay out there. You know, if somebody's injured, you know, hey, hang in there. You're going to get through this. You're going to make it okay. It's really a triumph of the human spirit. It kind of started off with Mike, but it's taken on a life of its own. And I'll say, you know, I was 70 pounds heavier when all this started, you know, and it's been a journey for me. It's been a lot of hard work, but it's because I draw my energy from everybody else in the Lizards, you know, and I want to carry my weight. That's why I post my runs, because I want to be responsible to all the other teammates. You know, I see everybody else as a teammate. I want to be a good teammate to the rest of the Lizards. So it's really cool. I mean, when you go to the races and you see other people in your colors, that makes me happy. I mean, I've always been a sports person, you know, and I like, you know, when I see other Mizzou fans anywhere in the world, I like giving them an MIZ, you know, and you get a ZOU back. Well, I feel that way with the Lizards. When I go to Walt Disney World to a race and I see somebody in our colors, mean, my heart just swells. It's just like that. That's a teammate, and Mike got that all started for us. So I'm very, very I'm so thankful to him for that.
And there really are, like, when you go to the races, there's a ton of lizards. Like you'll see the Volt green shirt literally throughout the course everywhere. And another thing that's really great about that Facebook group is the way that everybody's willing to help each other on registration day is unlike anything you'll see in any Discord or Reddit or anywhere else. Like if you have trouble getting into a race, you'll have people that have QIDs that they're literally giving away to other people. It's like, I already registered. Here's all the other, screens that I have so that you can register, and people are DMing each other and helping. And that day is so chaotic, and it's stressful and emotional for a lot of people that, really want to get their race, that group can be a lifesaver for a lot of people. And it is the tips that they have in there for all that kind of thing. Is anybody that's interested in a Run Disney race should definitely check it out, because it is absolutely worth it.
Yeah, Joe's a wizard with that stuff. Joe Fickus. He knows things that I couldn't pretend to know, and he has helped so many folks. And just a shout out to Joe, because he gives motivational posts, everybody getting like through training programs. I mean, he's always been there and supportive. Like, he's just so organized. Like, I wish I could be that organized. Like, I look at that stuff, I'm like, God, Joe, I wish I could like even know half that stuff and be that organized with his lists and so forth. So you're exactly right. And everybody kind of just follows that thread.
Was Joe Figment and Dreamfinder the one year?
Yes. Dude,
yes.
It was so great.
The costumes.
Before he stole Figment. Like, it was so real.
It was unreal.
I'm like, Joe's gonna go to jail.
Right? I know. That group is unlike most other running groups that are out there, unlike anything I've ever seen, because the encouragement that goes on there, I think, regardless of what you're doing, running, walking, swimming, doing whatever, there's not ever there's more likely to be a post that says, I don't feel like a runner, and then somebody else coming up and saying, you want to know why you are? Because you did.
Yeah.
And when you see in other groups, there's sort of a judgment about what that is, and everyone's on their own personal journey. And I think that's what's so unique about it too, that there's respect for everyone in that space. And I love that about that group.
I've always felt like I'm pretty good at registering for those races, like having the multiple devices and having the 50 different tabs and following all the instructions. And Joe still saved me and gave me a link to register one year. So like, definitely shout out to Joe, shout out to everybody in the Lizards, because it's such an awesome group. I don't personally like post my runs every day, but I love going in and reading it for inspiration and just staying plugged into what different people are doing, because this whole community of the Be Our Guest podcast and the Lizards, and it really says a lot about the Facebook group and even the Magic for Less Travel as a whole, right? I think it spreads across. There's so many people that can feel encouraged and don't feel like you have to post or share everything, but you do feel like you have relationships with these people that you don't even know. Like I talked about with Wade's. I've literally never talked to that guy ever. And I feel like I know more about his golf game than I do about my own father-in-law's, right? So, in the same, it goes Scotty G's brother or whatever. So, definitely a testament to everything that you guys have done. And I want to wrap this up because we are getting a little bit long. I want to play one more game, and it's going to be a very quick one, and it's called Keep, Replace, or Destroy. And we're going to do 2 rounds. And both of you are going to play Mike and Pam. I'm going to have you guys both play. You got to choose one to keep, one to replace, and one to destroy. And the first options are Tower of Terror, Big Thunder Mountain, or Space Mountain. Keep one, replace one, and destroy one.
So you going first, Pam? Go ahead.
Oh, yes, because you too. I'm definitely keeping Big Thunder. I feel like that's a ride that most guests can ride and enjoy. And I have such fond memories of my daughter on that attraction. Like a little girl screaming at the top of her lungs, could not get enough of it. That was her favorite. So then I have Tower and Space. I'm going to
replace, one to destroy.
I'm going to replace Tower. I think... it might be with a similar-ish attraction, but we all know that Tower is Guardians at Disneyland. So I think there can be some kind of, it could lend itself to that. And then that means I have to just destroy Space Mountain.
Bye.
Dang! I don't know if I thought that the whole way through. Can you edit this out?
No.
I'm gonna make lots of enemies with that. I love the theming of Space Mountain, and I love the history of Space Mountain as an attraction. It's not my favorite. I
agree.
I think I've seen Mike get out of that car and be like, I don't know that I'm going to be able to get out. To like,
yeah. No, that's it.
Mike, what are you doing for year 3?
So I'm gonna undo the damage Pam has done to our podcast. I'm keeping Space Mountain because you cannot destroy the Star Tunnel, first of all, because of the awesome ambiance of the Star Tunnel.
I know it lives on in my music.
Chocolate chip cookies, going by overhead as you're in the queue. I mean, all that stuff. I mean, it does readjust your back, and you need that every once. If you get rid of that in the Matterhorn, backs across the world would be in all kinds of bad shape. So. Anyway, I'm keeping that. That's my favorite. It doesn't love me back, but I do love it. Okay, so I'm keeping the Space Mountain. I'm getting rid of Tower. I just can't do drops. I know it's thematically awesome, but drops and me just don't get along well anymore. And replace Big Thunder. I don't know what you replace it with because I do like it, but maybe give it a little. I don't know what you'd replace it with.
A zhuzh.
Middle, yeah.
Pam's.
There it is. Yes, we got it.
We got the word zhuzh out of Pam on the podcast.
Yes.
We aim to please.
Bingo.
We had there it is. We had the Be Our Guest podcast on our podcast and got a zhuzh and the bell multiple times. I feel like as fans of your show, like we can't get any better than that. So
No, we can't.
Oh, that's great. That's going to wrap it up. We're definitely getting a little bit long. Thank you guys so much for joining us and doing this little crossover episode. I think it was a lot of fun, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Mike, just so everybody knows, and Pam, you also, but Mike, maybe go first. Where can people find you on social media? And I'm going to make sure links to your podcast are in our show notes along with your social media, as well as links to get a quote with you. You can get a quote with me. You can get a quote with Mike. We're all agents of the same place, but I'll make sure that we include everywhere that you can find Mike and Pam in the description of the episode.
Well, so you can follow me. I'm at Be Our Guest Mike on the socials, Twitter, Instagram. Instagram is probably the best place to follow me. Be Our Guest Mike, also on Threads. But really kind of the place I'd love you to have you just join us for great Disney conversation with awesome Disney fans. No ads, no nonsense. Just come over to the clubhouse that we have. It's our Discord server. You can find it at beourguestpodcast.com/clubhouse. I just added that this week, so I'm excited for that. Or /Discord, but beourguestpodcast.com/clubhouse. Come over, join the fun, and we'd love to see you there. You check out the Be Our Guest Podcast anywhere you find shows.
And we'll make sure that all the links are in the description. Pam, where can people find you on social?
TMFLT Pam, and I am not a prolific poster by any means, but there's some gems every now and then that get put out there.
Quality over quantity. I just spray. I do the opposite. I just throw it out.
Yeah, that's part of the work-life balance right there.
And I'll also make sure that Ricky and Scotty's socials are included in there, and I might have to reach out to Scotty and get him on an episode just for the fun of it. But again, thank you guys so much. Congratulations on your run in terms of what you've done for the Disney community, what you've done for people that listen to the show. It means a lot to everybody. I can confidently say that on behalf of all the people that listen to you guys. So thank you again, and we really appreciate you coming on.
We appreciate you giving us the opportunity. Yeah. It's been a blast. It's so much fun. We appreciate it so very much.
Yeah, it really has been fun.
Awesome. Well, I think that'll wrap it up. I don't know, Mike, if you want to end the live or if you want to add anything on.
We are good.
Awesome.
We're here. No, so we're here. So give your social stuff so I can have that on the audio, so I don't have to go back and search for it.
Sure, Chip. You want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'm at Robinson Dad Life on Instagram.
Okay. And I am at Adventures of a Disney Dad on Instagram and Facebook. I'm on Twitter, but I don't tweet because it's a scary place for people in the Disney community. I think it can get a little
Agreed.
it can get a little toxic. I am also at Adventures of a Disney Dad on TikTok, but you're going to get the same content that you get on Instagram. So if you want to stay away from the negativity over on that site, you can find me on